It's a privilege to be here and to speak on this subject. So I thought this would be an appropriate topic to connect with the innovation thing, because there's, besides inputs, there are also some agendas that I carry with me, and some of these agendas I'll share with you, because I'll have to also criticize policies which have driven some of those, the given cost for some of these agendas that I carry, because I believe that it's not that the government and the industry need not use design, but they have not been using it, although they have been available for 50 years. And why has this been so? I think yesterday when we talked to Sam Pitroda, I asked him why has CSIR got 25,000 crores when institutions like NID, IDC put together would get about 100 crores or 150 crores or 200 crores at the most. It seems to be very ridiculous to see in a country like this that we have this kind of disparity of allocation of grants. And it's not that people don't have the wisdom and the vision to follow this. So I think we have to reflect back on why is this happening, and is it that the design message is not being understood, it has not been carried forward, or it has been misunderstood? And it could very well be the case. Because I offer you some models. These have evolved over years of teaching, and each one is a full paper which you can download and connect. Design as fire, 3 orders of design, and design as a seed, because there are different models for the same thing. It's like the blind man and the elephant. They are all 3 existent at the same time. But I think we need to understand design as understanding systems, because many times the emphasis has been on products, and perhaps designers are also responsible for projecting objects and processes as the only outcome from design. And all our award ceremonies are all pegged around these objects, and therefore we may be giving the impression that that is what design is. And the other thing is that there are many intangibles in design and design thinking and design work, which I tried to explain a little bit in this 3 orders of design lecture, which I had done in 2009 in Istanbul, where the structure of design became visible to me, as there are indeed layers of design and design thinking. I'll expand a little bit on this as I go forward. And design as a seed is perhaps the most potent form that is not understood, that design can be a transformational idea, which is touched upon quite a lot, but it needs nurture. It needs investment. It needs care. I think yesterday Lalit Das talked about the caring that is required. I agree with him entirely on that front. And I think this is something that is very difficult to communicate to bureaucrats and people in who want action immediately. I want it done yesterday. It can't be done yesterday. You've got to pour water, you've got to plant something, you've got to watch it grow, you've got to tend for it, you've got to invest in it, and then it takes 200 years to build a forest. It may take time to build a great transportation system. It may take time to build and deliver a credible and usable health system. And it's not that these didn't exist. They may exist, but we have another problem there, because we get caught up with ideas like innovation, design. There are so many terminologies. So this I will touch upon. I promise to expand a little bit on the orders of design. There are 3 segments broadly here. The first layer, I believe, is pretty much understood. Material, craftsmanship, function, technique. All these areas have been invested in. There are many buyers into that area of design space. And the objects that are strewn around that diagram are all somehow connected with my own career in design as I moved through this journey. And somehow I find that I had also moved through some of these territories in much the same way. Started with the material layer, understanding material, understanding technique, understanding form, understanding how it was built. And the next layer is dealt with economy, aesthetics, the social and the linguistic layer, meanings, how they unfold in the products and so on. I'm just touching upon the key ideas over here. And in the 3rd order, which I've only begun to understand now, that the order of the politics, the order of the legislative layer, policies, drivers, things like that, and the spirit, the order of systems. I think these are areas that are very less understanding and very little written about in design literature that we can touch. There's much written about outside of design, which we need to assimilate into design literature. So I think, for instance, the area of spiritual and design, Maybe the religious texts have something much to say about it, but we haven't assimilated into our own way of working. You talk to technical education centers and say the spiritual is important, they will look at you very suspiciously and say this guy's got another agenda. But in a design school, these become very important agendas. And the projects that have been showcased in some of these journeys, for instance, the leather bag represents the Javaja project, where a student of mine worked with teams of people from IIMs and so on to connect with society and see how transformational change would be possible at the rural level. We did work in bamboo, we did work in handicrafts and so on. So I think some of these things are touched here. So the insights that came out of all of this, I got an occasion to speak about it at a digital conference in Hyderabad, 2007, when we started summarizing and saying, these could be potential directions that we go forward. There is, and the list of 5 areas that we put there was what I took away and brought back to my course that I was teaching at NIT, and where I think yesterday Raghu was talking about, the need for team work, collaborative play, collaborative work. 10 years ago, my course changed completely. I was working closely with Rashmi Korjan, teaching a course called Design Concepts and Concerns, and roughly around 10, 12 years ago, we decided it would no longer be individual instruction, it would be teamwork only. And we also did something which was radical, said nobody gets an individual score, you get a team score. So we had 5 teams, each team was given that topic, earth and environment, society and community, work productivity, and a topic within that, and explore it. Very difficult because they're very broad areas, but how do you think in design without connecting with the macro? So we evolved something called the macro-micro, philosophy of engaging with design, saying that you cannot do design without engaging both ends of the spectrum. And then we had also the technology issues to connect upon, and so on. So think sustainable, think experience. So some of these ideas were already creeping into the way we were working. And it happened because technology, the use of technology, the successes there, we were engaging with Apple, we were engaging with other, in terms of real connection. And we were also learning as we went along. In this, in my introducing me, I already mentioned this 230 sectors of the economy. I've been using 230. How did this number come up? It was again in one of our classes when we actually did, maps, building maps as to which are the sectors of the economy. We built models. And in the models, we found that broadly there were fields that we could identify and map into, and we came up with this number. And I'm sticking with this number. It might be 235, somebody will tell me 250, somebody will say 120, doesn't matter. But I think the key issues are there are some trends which are becoming visible because of the digital, but it doesn't mean the real world has gone away. It exists, and that is something sometimes being forgotten, that in the world of the digital, design education is losing the real contact. Unfortunately, all of us sit with our computers, do modeling, and believe that that is the real world, and we build great renderings, great concepts, but then you don't figure how do you translate it and bring it back into contact, not just in material, but in contact with people, real people. So I think here the issue of trends and effects becomes very important. And these are some of the trends that we identified. This is also from, a time when we are looking at effects. I call the Bihar election effect, for instance. Something which is considered, completely hopeless, completely changed. Huge transformation and hope, and hopium sort of flowing out from, that kind of change of transformation. So I think we still have hope. After 50 years of establishment of design, doesn't matter what the budgets are. Maybe sometimes you don't need money for things what we are doing. We need ideas, we need conviction, and we need the drive to take it forward. And the money will follow. I think this is why I raised this question to Sam Petrola yesterday, because the money is important. So I've started actually researching how much money is being spent by different institutions, asking the question, what have they delivered? I don't know if you know how much is spent on IIT system. It is enormous. But on the other hand, when you look at budgets of the country, we find that these budgets are limited. We now have the European effect when countries have actually spent what they don't have, and we are actually faced with a crisis today. India too has spent what we don't have, and we are in the throes of a crisis at the moment. Stock markets are in trouble. We don't know where to spend. We don't know where we're going to get the next payment from. And you have seen the problem with Air India, we have seen the problem with the airline system. Everywhere you go, you find that budgets become one of the drivers through which these operations work. So we have areas like agriculture, healthcare, education, media, all these and more. So I think we also started raising questions about where the design infrastructure should go. And we formed a group very spontaneously on the Design India Forum. All of you should be aware that there is such a forum in India called the Design India Forum, which is a discussion list online on Yahoo Groups. And it has about 1,600 people. It's not all inclusive because many people haven't joined. Many people have chosen not to join because of the politics of engagement, and some are unaware of it. And therefore, similarly, there's a PhD design list, which has another 2,000, 3,000 people today talking about the PhD education in design and so on. But what we raised with this model is that design almost does not appear to have a place in government's decision-making processes. And we neither have the design schools and the institutions and the policymakers offered credible directions for solving this thing. Because we don't have a voice in parliament, we don't have a voice in the top echelons of governance in India, not even at the state levels. I do not know of any state which has design on their agenda in their plan. I've collected half a dozen, budgets and plan reports from different, it doesn't appear, design. I think 20 years ago, I tried putting design on the Rajasthan government's agenda. And they included design and industrial design in that year's annual budget. And it made a huge difference downstream because somebody follows up and says, so if you're able to get this next 12th plan document with a clear statement of design and innovation in that planning document, some bureaucrat somewhere will say, ye likha hua hai, ye karna hai. And that's one way forward. And I was so happy to hear that the railway minister actually went down to NIT uninvited and said, you shall have a design lab for the railways. And we know what happened to the man, poor man, visionary that he was, and it's a big loss for design, that he was ousted immediately after the railway budget. These things happen in design, because design requires this macro, and we'll have to nurture it some way. So somebody pulled out that seed which was planted. And I don't know where that seed is lying now. Hopefully, that seed has potency and will find another fertile ground to grow. So we'll need to make it. So what we are saying is design could be existing state and a future state. How do you bridge this? And what do you put in between? What we have today is a tendering process. And we assume that some entrepreneur somewhere will create an answer and pre-made answer and come and present it to you. Fundamentally flawed model. Obviously, that is not the way forward. We invest in hundreds of schools to build that entrepreneur who will then come and suddenly deliver magic when you have not invested in that at all. There's no vision as to where we want to go. There's no vision as how you could get there. And there's no process through which you can connect the two ends together. Why are we in such a state? Can we change it? Are there any design policy schools that are needed that will actually innovate, build, try out, test, and build these things? So obviously there is a need to work at that. So envisioning investment in design, public debates, transparency may be a way forward. Before a new flyover is built, before a new railway crossing is put, are the local people consulted? Are the models actually shown to people? Is it a point of debate? Is it a point of discourse and discussion? Are alternatives looked at? Design competitions are separate and action is separate. I think we need to figure out ways of building an alternative for this tendering process. Tendering process for execution, very good. But tendering process for conceptualizing, building, trying out doesn't seem to make sense. So how do you bridge this lacuna? And we have crooks around, so obviously we'll need a way to figure that out, and that's why it's a wicked problem. So Vision first took some of these issues up and took it up with the government, and I think others will speak about this as well. Then there is this confusion that we talk about interchangeably about some of these terms, as if all of them are the same and, they go on. And somewhere I've also put from the back of my mind, without necessarily having absolute numbers, the kind of proportion that is being spent by the government and by industry on each of these sectors. Jugaad takes much of our money. because we celebrate Jugaad. In fact, I just bought a book in which Sam Pitroda has written the foreword, published from Harvard, and it's now on bookshelves around the world. And Jugaad is a very popular term. Much of the money that ought to be coming to design is being sucked out by Jugaad and officially sanctioned and approved. That means you have agencies like the National Innovation Foundation that claims that we are supporting grassroots innovation, but no designer is allowed to work there, because when you try and enter that space, you got to be unqualified, you got to be rural, you got to be a Gamadi, you got to be certain other qualifications. Then you have done a great job. So you have MITI Cool, and you have wonderful projects which have happened there, no dispute about it. And they've been, sort of scanned and mapped. And it's not that they have not made the effort to connect with design. GYAN was set up at NID, but that didn't work. Somehow, that bridge between the grassroots innovator and the formal engineer, manager, trainer, and so on, industry is beginning to see this. BOP was another term that came up, and this is also there. Similarly, innovation, unfortunately, is understood more in a technological sense. So much of the money goes to technologies, of innovating new technologies, and so on. If you look at the way investments are made, we talk about the leading edge, as if innovation is required at the leading edge. What does that mean? It means high technology, premier institutions. But if I draw another triangle over this in the reverse order, that will be the nature of funding. Bulk of the money would go into the premier institutions, lesser amount into the bulk of the universities. I looked at IIT Guwahati versus University of Guwahati, which has hundreds of departments. If you compare the two budgets, you will find that one has got the lion's share, the other has got a fraction of that lion's share, and so on. Is that right? Is that correct? Are they incapable people? We don't know. I think these are. And then if you look further out, you find that this whole area, which I call the thick end of the wedge, which is a paper that I'd done in 95, 96 for the CE, and is still living in my. In 99, for instance, when we were talking to UNDP, we coined this phrase and said that we need to look at the innovating the larger proportion of our society, making investments there so that those people become, startup entrepreneurs in the village level, and which we had tried out with Javaja, with many other things. The reality is there. If you look at the changing demographic map of the country, we find that because of digitally enabled possibilities, there are many new possibilities emerging, and which is actually possible. There are critics of the Aadhaar system, but there are also possibilities that you can see as opportunities over here as to what we could do with digitally enabled services. For instance, there are end-to-end health services possible. Many things are possible, but have we innovated them? The answer is not yet. Do we have the institutions capable of handling these? Not yet, because we are still largely focused on the object space and not so much on services space and not so much on delivery of, and I don't think we have the understanding of the tools that may be required to operate in that space. For instance, fields of sociology, psychology, anthropology, and so on, integrating it strongly into design action is in fact missing in action. For instance, there's some case material that shows that there are wonderful things that are doable and can be done without much money. This is Poonam Bir Kasturi's Daily Dump, started a few years ago, and it's 2006, and today they are actually handling 6,500 kilos daily of garbage from Bangalore, which the municipality is missing out. So, and this has been cloned in about 15, 20 cities, so the multiple numbers are there. What is it about? They prototype, promote, adopt. And without investment in the prototypes, you would not have the flow through that comes from this. We actually looked at this in the class that we did in 2010 at NID. This is the course that I was teaching, Design Concepts and Concerns. Because the agenda had come up that government is going to start new schools, we said, let's conceptualize what could be these new schools and in what locations. We had 6 teams, so 3 teams are shown here. We built models as to possible futures of those schools. If a school in the East Zone was modeled after Durga, the South Zone team said they'll have a Superman coming out of their team who's able to do everything. This is the vision that the design students had of what could be those schools. But where is this envisioning in our public space? We actually have put out agendas, we have put out plans, we asked for what is this new NID is going to come up, There is not document available. There is no envisioning done. Who is handling this? Who is responsible for putting 400, 500 crores down the drain without having a vision? So we raised this issue and said, you need a vision. We also got involved with talking of the thick end of the wedge. We said, unless you know where you want to invest and who are the guys, we said, you need a map of India. We need a map of what are these craft skills and so on. We were able to produce a book called Handmade in India, which at least maps out. But this is 1/4 of the total task. Government has abandoned the rest of the 3 tasks, which were proposed in a combined way right up front. The first one was the encyclopedic capture. But the next stages, we do not know where it will go. But it's important to say that the diversity of India is so enormous, and we're fortunate that we have it still, and we need to work around that. So what are the lessons why did we come to that? Because we have faith that the processes that we are using make sense, and they will actually deliver some things and we had built, for instance, if you want to solve poverty in rural India and parts of urban India, one of the ways forward is to build local entrepreneurship, local solution. Design can actually do this. And is there a process through which, do we have an experience base on it? Yes, we have almost 800-900 craft documentations done at an ID, which is unpublished. I've been asking for it to be published in the wish that it is available. There's no reason why it should not be published. It's just simple cussedness that you don't make it available to this. Having been invested in, why it's not made available. I can understand. Similarly, there are thousands of design tasks which we have done, which actually delivers huge value and which has been unrecorded and talked about. Yesterday, Professor Rao shared some of his work, but there are thousands of such projects in variety of materials which have been done. And this is and here I was working with a group in IICD saying that this methodology, I call this the footprints thing. When you enter a location, find out a resource map, capture it, go forward. There are many steps involved. I won't take time explaining it. But what we can do is, once we learn from these footprints, is to do the raindrop strategy of pour it across the country. 6.5 lakh villages in the country. We are talking about rural to urban. Unfortunately, I got very angry yesterday when I heard the Abdul Kalam related lecture. You want to make rural into urban, Unfortunate direction, I think. But I think this is what is happening, because people in power decide that certain things have to be done, but have they discussed it? Have they dialogued it? Have they raised this issue? And are we concerned about what they are doing? And is that the right way to go? Does all of rural have to become urban, then we become modern? Is that the assumption? And somebody has to raise these questions. But with IICD, I was working on how do you incubate local, skill sets and build something out of it. And I think it's possible to build. This is again a full paper, which I had done for Helsinki, where the activity research paper was being done. This brings me to a new idea. This is new, and this is the first time I'm sharing it in public, the mind-body map. Imagine the mind like a canvas. It's an infinite canvas. And each of the stars and dots are individual experiences and insights that you've gathered in a lifetime of existence. This informs our decisions as to what we will do and where we stand. This experiential map all of us carry. And these influence the resource maps that are the perceptions that we can have and what we can see. It's like the blind man and the elephant again. There are much that we don't see. I don't see the empty auditorium. I can choose to see another view, because I can be, completely, ignoring that there's one person there and there are so many people here. But it's like this. The mind also is like this. There are spaces, there are things that we want to keep. And there are taboo spaces which we are not allowed to enter. We all know about that. Immediately you'll think of sex, you'll think of... It's not just that. There are religious taboos, there are material taboos, there are social taboos, there are economic taboos that, you don't want to be seen as luxurious. So you won't wear that, gold-trimmed shoe, for instance. But there are others who will not even care. They will not be found walking in public without a gold-trimmed shoe. Or a very exotic leather product, which is exotic because it's from a very rare species of animal and so on, because that shows power, it shows... So there are many ways to live, and each one can have his own way. But there are taboos that all of us carry. And I think it's important to understand that in design, we also need the other side, which is the opportunity maps. And what we build as opportunities require few qualities in all of us. One is imagination, which is imagined possibilities, which is one of the missing elements, if you find, of in government spending in various places. We say this is not possible. Why is it not possible? Because nobody has imagined an alternative and shared it in public space. So therefore, it becomes very credible that we can ask for many imagined possibilities to be shared continuously for all our problems that are there. So why are these not in the agenda of design schools? We keep making new leather bags, and we keep making new shoes, and keep making new, and we have more and more institutions to make these new kinds of objects because industry may need it. One more car, one more automobile. People are constantly making cars, or just the front end of the car, because it's a good exercise to do. How do you make a tail lamp as different from... We are working in the space of differentiation rather than space of meaning making. I think we need to really rethink whether we want to go towards just differentiating where the competitor has to be different from the competitor, because much of our work is in that space. And we train people to be different, not to be more meaningful, not to be more relevant, and so on. I think that's where the context, the culture, the social... There's much I can talk about this, because this requires a full lecture, actually, and perhaps another occasion I'll be able to build on it. But what is important here is to say that I'm stressing upon the body is also an infinite space. It's not what we consider that a limited one body. It's infinite. Because I'll tell one word and your body will react. Avakkai pickle. Do you have a little bit of saliva in your mouth? It immediately responds to that word. Now, these are things that we don't value, because it's not just designing food. It is, connected so strongly to the body. What we do, how we think, how we do, and then the sensory organs that we have, all of them. Not just seeing, we stress a lot on visual dimension, but we don't touch upon the other dimensions. Yesterday we had a good exposition of music and the use of music to, that kind of discourse to teach language. But I think design too should be taught through some of those sensory dimensions, and we miss on this. And there too we have taboo spaces, we have things. So I've covered the appropriate parts of the body to say that there are more, because different cultures will respond differently. But what is important to understand is the tangible and the intellectual need to be, balanced in the educational process. And in craft, for instance, it teaches us a great deal about quality and workmanship. Sport can teach us about skill and sportsmanship. I think craftsmanship and sportsmanship are things which education is not teaching today. Because you may concentrate on building skills, on building abilities, but I think Lalit talked about the value systems. I think they are important. So how do you bring tone and sensitivity in music, form and composition? Composition is something altogether, because it's a matter of arranging. Design uses composition all the time. These are the propositional compositions that we do. The propositional space is something that we need, which makes it very political. For instance, politics we think is oppositional politics. You oppose whatever is said by the other group. But I think we need to enter into a new space called the propositional politics, where we actually throw in wonderful concepts into a space so that people can actually churn and build that. And I think, so there's a lot that we need to figure out how we can go forward. And I think this particular model, and I want to share with you very quickly, I'll run through bamboo. Yes, it's a long process. For instance, we talked about seedlings of wealth in 1995. It's a paper in Bali that I presented, where first time I realized that we are not dealing with objects anymore. We're dealing with an ecosystem of people, nature, and so on. We said, okay, how do we build this ecosystem? It's not, you cannot do products for a rural economy unless you know how it is farmed, how it's cultivated, how it is managed, and so on. So we said seedlings of wealth was a concept that was built. Then in 1999, we got an opportunity to articulate as a UNDP project for a nation building. It was accepted. $9 million were invested in it. Much of it was sucked out by corruption, unfortunately, but still some things survived, and it went on. So we built this idea that you can have natural resources on a footprint in a particular place, whatever it might be. Generalize that understanding. Train people to use those natural resources to make meaningful objects or services or whatever locally. So you can have a local-to-local economy that is invisible in the GDP. So what? You're not going to say growth. You're not going to see anything, but you'll have very happy people living in that ecology. And this is what happened. Actually, we tested it out with Katlamara, and we found that the local bamboo, which is cultivated in the local field, can become school furniture, housing products. We actually designed those things, and we got people to use it. But without budgets from Government of India or from the Government of Tripura. Possible. Is it possible that people can grow their food, eat their food, live happily, and go on? It's possible. But this is not considered to be great economics. Why? Do we need to redesign economics? Perhaps. We also have the export economics and smart technologies. Use a little tool, figure out a way to connect it. This joint was a breakthrough connection. We deliberately did not patent it. It's patentable, but we deliberately made it public source, open source, put it out in space, so everybody could copy. So why not? And now we have 50 hectares of plantation standing in Tripura, and it's growing. It's spreading. The virus is spreading. People are figuring out that you can actually grow more. And there are many farmers involved with it. So it's not just the product. And the picture on top is the chair which is knocked down, which can be carried and taken and so on. This is just one product. But what we did was made a business plan saying that 150 products, we have actually designed 500 products, which can be made with this story, with the same one species of bamboo. So we have 136 species of bamboo, which can grow in different territories and so on. So I think it's possible. So if you go back and forth, you find that these are the experiences. And in design, we have to connect with our convictions and with our story. Because it's about, believe me, man, I know what I'm talking, because I've been there. But this is within our body, you cannot see it. Now, how do you transmit this to somebody else? So it's through the prototype, it's through the demonstration and so on. I think this is really what is the essence that we need to understand, that there is, remember, we are talking about two things, the mind-body map and the thick end of the wedge. We need investments at the thick end of the wedge. And believe me, that design is a tool that can be used with this kind of finesse and direction. And then we need to demonstrate it through many of our actions. So thank you for your indulgence. So thank you very much.